Picture this, a tiny startup, founded in a humble California garage back in 1976 by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, somehow morphs into a staggering $4.56 trillion empire. How on earth does that happen? Welcome to Market Plainly. In this explainer, we're decoding Apple's unbelievable success by drawing an unexpected but fascinating parallel to the highly centralized, closed administrative systems of ancient Egypt.
It sounds a bit crazy at first, I know, but bear with me. The secret to Apple's sustained dominance actually mirrors ancient pharaonic blueprints. We are talking about absolute language control and total logistical supremacy. Analysts call this an economic moat, a sustainable competitive advantage that is so deeply entrenched, rivals just can't breach it.
So, we're going to break this analogy down into 5 key parts: the trillion-dollar walled garden, the tech language canon, the modern scribal elite, mastering the supply chain, and finally, the very real threats to the closed system today.
Let's dive right into part 1, the trillion-dollar walled garden.
For over 3,000 years, the pharaohs maintained order through a strictly monopolized written language called MWNT. Apple built its modern-day walled garden using the exact same philosophy through a strategy called vertical integration. Basically, they control absolutely everything, from the proprietary hardware chips inside your phone to exclusive operating systems like iOS. Nobody else enters, and Apple dictates all the rules.
But you have to remember, Apple's evolution wasn't a straight, easy line to the top. After the massive early success of the Apple II and the launch of the Macintosh, brutal corporate struggles actually pushed Steve Jobs out of the company in 1985. And without his vision, the company completely tanked. By mid-1997, Apple was essentially 90 days away from total bankruptcy.
What saved them was a highly controversial $150 million emergency lifeline from their biggest rival, Microsoft. That cash stabilized the company just enough to bring Jobs back, and that return sparked an absolute renaissance. By launching the iMac, the iPod, the iPhone, and the iPad, Apple didn't just release new products. They redefined entire consumer markets and established that fiercely loyal ecosystem we know today.
Which brings us to part 2. The tech language canon.
With the company saved, Apple started structuring its ecosystem in a way that is strikingly similar to how ancient Egypt structured its communication. The efficiency of Egypt's empire relied on a 3-tiered writing system. Apple uses this exact same 3-tiered strategy to command premium pricing. At the very top, you have the monumental level. That's Apple's premium brand design, creating an emotional bond with the user. Then, the operational level, which is their closed proprietary code that blocks competitors. Finally, the transactional level, things like Apple Pay. It creates a totally frictionless daily experience that keeps you locked tightly inside their ecosystem. Ancient scribes actually used a technique called retrography, where they would reverse reading directions just to control who could access information. Apple does this all the time. Think about when they eliminated the headphone jack, or how they enforced the Lightning port for years. They literally forced the entire accessory market and you, as the consumer, to adapt to Cupertino's rigid rules.
Let's move to part 3, the modern scribal elite.
A closed system this massive requires a very specific, deeply divided workforce. There's an ancient Egyptian text called the Satire of the Trades that famously mocked physical labor while elevating the intellectual figure of the scribe. It is a brilliant illustration of Apple's modern corporate structure. Apple keeps all the highly valued scribal work, the intellectual design, the software architecture, the marketing, in California. Meanwhile, they outsource the grueling physical toll of mass manufacturing to a vast network of third-party laborers in Asia. This surgical division is what maximizes their astronomical profit margins while letting them keep total control over their intellectual property.
That brings us to part 4, mastering the supply chain. While Steve Jobs built the brand's mythology, financial analysts generally agree it was Tim Cook who truly secured the empire. Cook implemented a logistical model that relies on real-time, just-in-time inventory. Apple makes massive upfront payments to completely monopolize factory capacity in Asia. Basically, they crush the competition before a single rival smartphone is even assembled. As they diversify production into countries like India, they are relentless. Apple even negotiated special diplomatic green corridors at the Chennai airport. They slashed export customs clearance times from 30 hours down to an unbelievable 6 hours. That is operational efficiency on a mind-boggling scale. And this ruthless efficiency translates directly into historic wealth. From crossing their first trillion-dollar valuation in 2018 by pushing high-margin digital services,
all the way to a staggering $4.56 trillion valuation. Apple is arguably the greatest masterpiece of value extraction and market dominance in modern corporate history.
But we have to look at Part 5, threats to the closed system. History warns us that even the most powerful closed systems eventually collide with insurmountable external pressures. The 3,000-year-old hieroglyphic tradition ultimately collapsed not from within, but because of Roman imperial edicts. It proves that isolated, proprietary systems are incredibly vulnerable to outside regulators.
And today, Apple's fortress is under heavy siege. We are seeing massive antitrust probes in the European Union and the US, accusing them of monopolistic practices. Regulators are forcing hardware standards like USB-C and demanding App Store sideloading. On top of that, there's a rapid, aggressive industry shift toward open, decentralized artificial intelligence, a game Apple's currently scrambling to dominate.
Look, there is no denying Apple has fundamentally changed how billions of people work, communicate, and consume digital content. But to survive this massive wave of complex regulations and open technology, they have to find a way to integrate their historic security with modern interoperability. They simply can't dictate the rules completely alone anymore.
Apple's story of corporate dominance is far from over. And hey, in the next episode of our Business Empire series, we are shifting gears to look at another tech giant. We'll be exploring how Microsoft took over business, breaking down how they built the enterprise software that literally runs the modern world. But for Apple, the ultimate test of its economic moat will be its ability to rewrite its own rigid rules before the market rewrites them by force. So, what do you think? Will Apple's walled gardens successfully evolve, or is it destined to become a silent temple in the desert?